At the beginning of the story, we see a sniper named Bob, who is currently in Africa on a mission with his partner Donnie. After a brief observation, Bob spotted a terrorist's vehicle and immediately took the shot, killing him. Before they could escape, a group of terrorists opened fire on them. Bob demonstrated his incredible skills and eliminated several of them. However, the situation quickly escalated when an enemy helicopter appeared and began dropping bombs around them. Bob sought help from the CIA, but no one responded. During this intense exchange of fire, a bullet struck Donnie, killing him instantly. Seeing his partner's death, Bob became enraged and fired several shots at the helicopter. At first, he missed his target, but after a few more attempts, he successfully shot it down. 3 years later, Bob had retired from the army and was living a quiet, peaceful life in the woods with his dog. One day, a man named Isaac Johnson, the head of the CIA, approached him. Isaac informed Bob that there was an imminent threat, an attack on the President of the United States. He needed Bob's expertise to help prevent this tragedy. Bob's task was to devise potential assassination plans so that Isaac's team could prepare for every possible scenario. Initially, Bob refused the offer because he was retired and didn't want to return to his dangerous past. But after Isaac explained the gravity of the situation, Bob reluctantly agreed. Before leaving, Isaac gave Bob all the necessary details and asked him to meet in Washington the following week. A week later, Bob arrived in Washington, D.C., where the president was scheduled to give a major speech. After several days of research and planning, Bob concluded that the attack would most likely take place in Philadelphia. Isaac thanked him for his analysis and asked him to be present on the day of the president's speech. Soon the day of the event arrived. The president stepped onto the stage to address the nation. Bob accompanied Isaac to a secure room overlooking the city. There, Bob met a man named Michael Soar, another member of Isaac's team who was responsible for the president's security. As the president began his speech, Bob warned them that this was the perfect moment for an attack. He urged them to get the president off the stage immediately, but before Bob could finish his sentence, a police officer in the room suddenly shot him. At the same time, an unknown sniper fired at the president. Chaos erupted. Bob smashed a window and escaped before anyone could stop him. As soon as he left, Isaac's team cleared the area and intentionally left Bob's sniper rifle and fingerprints behind, framing him for the assassination attempt. Meanwhile, an FBI officer named Nick tried to intercept Bob, but Bob overpowered him, handcuffed him, and explained that he was being set up. Before leaving, Bob told Nick that he hadn't killed the president, and that someone inside the operation had betrayed him. He then stole Nick's car and fled the scene. However, before he could get far, an FBI team located him and launched a full-scale pursuit. To escape, Bob drove into a car wash, treated his wounds, and prepared himself to uncover the truth behind this deadly conspiracy. However, a short while later, when Bob emerged onto the road, a police team surrounded him. Having no other option, he put the car in reverse gear and drove straight into the river. The FBI team searched the river thoroughly, but they couldn't find him because Bob had already escaped by clinging onto a passing boat. After some time, he reached the shore, stole a truck, and fled the area. Meanwhile, all the country's news channels began showing Bob's picture on television, labeling him as the president's assassin. At the FBI headquarters, everyone was furious with Nick because Bob had escaped under his watch. Nick told his superior that while fleeing, Bob had said he didn't kill the president. However, his superior didn't believe him. As punishment, he demoted Nick and reassigned him to work at the FBI call center. Later that night, Bob arrived at a supermarket. Before entering, he cut off the power supply to avoid being tracked. He then went inside, bought some supplies from a woman at the counter, and went to the restroom to bandage his wounds. Meanwhile, the woman grew suspicious of him and immediately called the FBI. Nick received the call, where the woman informed him that Bob had been in her store just moments ago. Trusting her, Nick reported this to his superior, but because of his recent failure, his superior ignored the information. Still determined, Nick continued working on the case all night, gathering every piece of information he could about Bob. The next morning, one of Nick's colleagues, a woman from the same department, entered the office. When she saw Nick still working on the case, she informed him that the police officer who had shot Bob was murdered the previous night. Hearing this, Nick began to suspect that Bob might truly be innocent and that someone was framing him. Meanwhile, Bob visited a woman at her home. This woman was none other than Sarah, Donnie's widow. Although Sarah was meeting Bob for the first time, she had known about him for years. After Donnie's death, Bob had written her letters and sent flowers every year in remembrance of his late friend. Since Sarah had seen Bob's face on TV, She was initially terrified and refused to let him in. However, when Bob explained that he was innocent, she hesitated, but eventually allowed him inside. Once inside, Sarah told Bob that the president had survived and that the bullet had actually struck a politician from another country. Meanwhile, Nick continued his own investigation. He began inspecting the buildings around the scene of the shooting. In one of the nearby buildings, he discovered marks from a sniper tripod only 500 meters away from the stage. Nick found this strange because, according to Bob's military file, he was one of the best snipers in the world, a man who could hit targets from miles away. So how could someone with his precision miss from just 500 meters and accidentally hit another person? On the other hand, Sarah, who was a nurse by profession, began treating Bob's injuries. When Bob regained consciousness, Sarah told him that the government had even killed his dog. Hearing this, Bob was filled with rage and sorrow. He swore to clear his name and expose those responsible for framing him, but for that, he needed someone on the inside, and the only person who could help him was Nick. Bob then began formulating a plan. According to this plan, Sarah meets Nick at a cafe. Sarah tells him everything and gives him Isaac's car number so that Nick can investigate further and instill fear in Isaac. Nick does the same and starts tracking the car number. Meanwhile, Isaac also learns that an FBI officer is tracking his car, and this is the same officer in whose car Bob escaped. Before Nick can get to the bottom of the matter, Isaac's men kidnap him and beat him terribly. They wanted to know how much truth Nick knew. But when Nick didn't reveal anything despite their efforts, they decided to kill him. Before they could kill him, Bob killed all of Isaac's men with his sniper rifle. Nick told Bob that he knew he was innocent and advised him to surrender to the police so that the law could help him. However, Bob refused, saying that if he didn't take revenge on Isaac, he would hurt others the same way. Nick agreed and decided to support him. Meanwhile, Isaac and his men discovered that Bob sends flowers to a woman named Sarah every year. Upon learning this, Isaac sent his men to kidnap Sarah. On the other hand, Bob went to meet a weapons expert and asked if it was possible for a bullet to be fired from one gun but appear to be fired from another. The man replied that it was possible through a method called the paper patching technique, where the bullet is fired from one place but seems to come from somewhere else. The man also told Bob that apart from him, only one other person could shoot with such accuracy, a man named Mika. When he described Mika's appearance, Bob immediately realized that Mika was none other than Michael Sander, a member of Isaac's team. After this, Nick called his office and got Michael Sander's address, who was currently in Virginia. That night, two of Isaac's men broke into Sarah's house to kidnap her. Sarah managed to kill one of them, but unfortunately, the other captured her. Isaac then realized that Bob must have discovered everything about Michael Sander and would come after him. So Isaac made a plan. When Bob and Nick arrive in Virginia to find Michael Sander, they would ambush and kill them. Following the plan, Bob and Nick reached Virginia. Bob went to a supermarket and bought all the materials needed to make bombs. Knowing that Isaac and Michael would attack them, Bob taught Nick some sniping skills so he could assist when needed. The next day, Bob went to Michael's farmhouse while Nick stayed at a distance, spotting and guiding him through the guards' locations. Bob silently eliminated all the guards one by one. Before going inside, he planted several bombs in the nearby bushes. He then entered the farmhouse where Michael was already waiting for him. Michael revealed that the real plan wasn't to kill the president, but to kill the leader of another country. That day, he was going to reveal the truth about the village that Isaac and his team had destroyed at the request of an oil company. 3 years ago, a major oil corporation was building a pipeline through a small African village, and they needed to evacuate all the villagers. When the villagers refused to leave, Isaac and his team killed everyone and buried them in a mass grave. At that moment, Bob finally understood everything. 3 years ago, when he and Donnie were in Africa, the U.S. Army had abandoned them to die. Bob realized that not only Isaac, but also the country's most powerful politicians were involved in the entire conspiracy. After confessing all of this, Michael shot himself. Right then, Isaac's men attacked Bob. Nick, positioned at a distance, activated all the bombs planted outside. Meanwhile, Bob began taking down Isaac's men one by one from inside. After eliminating them all, Bob left the farmhouse. But just as he did, a helicopter began chasing him. Since Bob and Nick had already prepared for this attack, they fought Isaac's men fiercely. When the helicopter landed near an oil tanker, Bob shot at it, causing a massive explosion that destroyed the helicopter completely. After this, we see Isaac and his companions companions growing increasingly tense as Bob got closer to them. Meanwhile, Nick called the FBI and told them that he had captured Bob. He did this intentionally so that Isaac would hear the news and contact him. The plan worked. Within minutes, Isaac called Nick. Bob spoke directly to Isaac and gave him an offer. If Isaac released Sarah, Bob would delete Michael Sanders' recording, which exposed how Isaac and his team had wiped out an entire village in Africa under the oil company's orders. Isaac had no other choice and agreed to the deal. They decided to meet the next day on a snowy mountain. The following day, Isaac and his team arrived at the mountain with Sarah. A man began walking toward them, but Isaac's hidden sniper shot him. Isaac thought he had killed Bob, but it was actually a trap. The man was Nick, wearing a bulletproof vest under his jacket. When the sniper fired at Nick, Bob immediately located the sniper's position and took him out with a perfect headshot. He also shot the man holding Sarah captive. Meanwhile, we see the FBI chief receiving a letter from Nick, explaining the entire mission. After reading it, the FBI team headed straight for the mountain to arrest both Isaac and Bob. After killing the sniper, Bob revealed himself. Nick disarmed Isaac and his men, but suddenly Sarah grabbed a gun and killed the man who had kidnapped and tortured her. Bob calmed her down and began speaking to Isaac and Malcolm. Malcolm told Bob that he couldn't harm them with the recording, as several top government officials were also involved in the conspiracy. By then, Bob realized that if he made the evidence public, the government would kill him, Nick, and Sarah. So he decided to share the recording with the authorities instead. The FBI team soon arrived and arrested Bob, Isaac, and all their associates. A few days later, Bob was brought before the court, where Isaac and his associates were also present. Bob requested his rifle, the same one found at the crime scene, to prove his innocence. He told the judge that before leaving his house that day, he had removed the firing pin from his gun. And without a firing pin, it was impossible for any weapon to fire. To prove his words, Bob pointed the gun at Nick and pulled the trigger, but the bullet remained inside the gun, proving that Bob had been framed. With this, the court declared Bob completely innocent. However, no action was taken against Isaac, as he had already destroyed the last remaining evidence against him. That night, Isaac and Malcolm went to their farmhouse celebrating what they thought was their victory. But their celebration didn't last long. Bob arrived silently and began taking down Isaac's men one by one. As Isaac stood up in shock, Bob shot him in the chest, ending his life. Then he went inside and killed Malcolm as well. Before leaving, Bob opened the gas pipeline and set it ablaze, blowing up the entire farmhouse so that no trace of evidence remained. That night, Bob finally took his revenge and got justice for all the innocent people killed in that village years ago. Outside the farmhouse, Sarah was waiting for him. Bob walked toward her, and together they left, ready to start a new life, far away from pain, war, and betrayal.